Do you remember the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? When people didn't know the answer, they could phone a friend and ask for help. Well, our very special guest today, Josh Iwata, is the CEO of Parent Lab, which has developed an amazing, revolutionary AI-enhanced app that can help parents become experts in their children. It's like a phone a friend anytime you need it for your own child. I can't wait for you to hear more about what this looks like. But Parent Lab is based on the philosophy of secure attachment. And Josh will talk more about that in our interview. But it also celebrates each child's unique essence and is grounded in the belief that a secure attachment raises happy children who become happy adults. Parent Lab leverages the research from top minds in child development and psychology to really give parents an amazing resource and experts right at their fingertips. Let's welcome Josh Iwata to the show. Don't forget to tell your friends about it, and also anytime give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen to us on so that more people can hear more about all of the great things that we have on the Teaching Your Toddler podcast. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Teaching Your Toddler show. Today we have Josh Iwata with us to talk to us about a very exciting new innovation that he has. But first, Josh, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what's going on with Parent Lab and Era?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Mary Jo. I know that I am a little bit of an unconventional guest for you, maybe. My background is in the startup world. I come from the tech industry, and I've been a designer, a product designer in tech for about 20 years. I started doing graphic design and websites, and then got into software and eventually into leadership positions, being a COO, being a creative director. And I'm currently CEO of Parent Lab. And, throughout that time, my longest running job, my most important job, and my most challenging job is being a parent. So being a dad, I've got two teenage daughters, 14 and 16. And my sense was in the, 16 years of raising them that parenting was getting harder in a lot of ways, and that technology wasn't really helping. And so that experience of not knowing exactly where to turn, both my parents passed away when I was a young man, and looking online for answers, trying to find, wade through the fire hose of information out there in parenting. I found that, my experience really kind of mirrors people in general. When you look at research, the average parent thinks that parenting is harder than it was 20 years ago, which is kind of a shocking piece of data from like the Pew Research Center. And they also think that it's one of the most important and challenging jobs in their lives. And so that kind of realization that there wasn't a lot of support in the tech industry that I'm in was in some ways making it harder. I'm sure, as you've spoken to many of your guests about, what's this recognition that, why is that? Why isn't the tech industry, why aren't products being created for parents in the same way to solve the challenge of parenting as with other problems in our lives?
Hmm.
And so Parent Lab was started with this kind of notion that parenting doesn't only affect parents. I like to say that 100% of people are affected by parenting 100% of the time. When we look around at our society, our politicians, our teachers, our friends, our kids, ourselves, we're all massively affected by parenting. And so Parent Lab was really started with this idea of, what if we could create a product for parents that helps them with some of the challenges of modern day parenting in this era. And as we went down the path of talking to researchers, we've worked with researchers, psychologists, neuroscientists from all over the world over the past 6 years. It turned out that there was already, a theory out there to help parents that we've known about for decades called attachment theory. And so Parent Lab has just launched our most recent product, which is called Era. And the goal is to help create generational wellness through secure attachments with your kids. And we like to say it's grounded in attachment theory, and it's driven and personalized by AI.
Tell us a little bit about attachment theory.
Sure, I would love to. So I'm sure you're familiar with, and I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with attachment styles. And in kind of modern day language, they've been pertained to adult relationships in many cases. But attachment styles come from the attachment you form with your primary caregiver or caregivers when you're very young. And they become a little more rigid as we become older. So attachment theory was founded in the 1960s by John Bowlby, a British researcher, and his work was further fleshed out by Mary Ainsworth and others. But you got to think about the 60s was like the atomic age, right? The advice to parents was to put your baby in a bassinet, feed it from a glass bottle, and to not pick it up when it cried. John Bowlby had the sense that maybe we've gotten away from something, maybe we're missing something. And his hypothesis was that humans have a biological need for connection with their caregivers. And through his research now, confirmed decades later, it's kind of a stupidly obvious truth that we've
Mm-hmm.
lost throughout the modern age,
Mm-hmm.
that the most important thing for a parent, and in many cases, just as important as the basic needs we meet for our children, like food or shelter or clothing, is connection. And
Mm-hmm.
the quality of that connection will inform who our children go on to become, how they view love, how they view relationships. So that really is attachment theory in a
Mm-hmm.
nutshell.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of a profound idea that our connection and our attention is actually not, it's not a nice to have for kids. It's a requirement.
Hmm. Absolutely. When I was reading the material about you to prepare, I remember you mentioned when your first child was born that the nurse wanted you to leave her in the bassinet, not touch her, and everything. It's like what, right? Like, and you felt that that was against your instinct, right? It kind of goes along with what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean that story that you're kind of referencing was my first night as a father, and my child was, fussing in her bassinet, and the nurse had told me just, leave her alone. She's fine. You rest. You're a tired dad. But my instincts, yeah, were that's not okay. I need to pick up my child.
Hmm.
And I sat her next to me and she fell asleep right away. That proximity for her, that connection was already starting to be a necessity for her.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that many of us as parents, we've almost lost our, what I would say is intuition as
Hmm.
parents. We've outsourced it to experts, which is kind of ironic for, you know, to, to be on a podcast with a parenting company and you're, hosting advice for parents, but we've lost our instincts and we stopped trusting that intuition.
Hmm.
Where the really ironic thing is you think about 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, we didn't have any of the parenting resources we have now.
No.
I mean, a recent Google search showed 1.6 billion results for parenting advice. And there was a research study that came out last year that showed that the more parents looked at the fire hose of information, that the less confidence they had as a parent, which is kind of shocking. So this
Mm.
kind of current solution of like more and more and more information, it
Hmm.
doesn't seem to be being effective at helping us raise our kids better.
Hmm. And so tell us how ERA does help. How does it sort of break through all of that?
Sure. Well, through the, 6 years that Parent Lab's been in existence, we've tried a lot of things. We've created a library of content. We have podcasts and we have courses, and we've done a lot of things to try to bring attachment science into parents' everyday lives. But one of the biggest challenges we found was that parents really required personalization. Just giving them the information wasn't enough, and they required guidance. And those are both problems that can be solved with a human, but we're trying to create a technology solution, right? We're trying to say people have discovered meditation through apps like Headspace
Hmm.
or Reframe to help them drink less. Why can't we do that with parenting? Why can't we present something like that? And that was really the biggest challenge was any of the digital products we created were not personalized and they really didn't provide much guidance for parents. So we ended up kind of contributing to the problem of like the 1.6 billion search results, is just giving more information out there. Era was born when AI came onto the scene, and we realized through our own research and trial and error, oh, AI is way better at helping to personalize and give kind of reflective advice to parents than we could
Mm.
have ever anticipated. It's
Mm.
really bad at
Hmm.
other things. You don't
Hmm.
use it, for instead of an attorney or something or to do math.
Right.
But surprisingly, it does a great job at helping you kind of understand your feelings and dissect things. And it does an amazing job at personalization. And when I say personalization, I don't mean like just recommending pieces of content. It literally, and I can talk more about this, I'm happy to, but Era is able to start to learn and understand the user and the family
Hmm.
so that it can take your kids' names, it understands their hobbies or their likes or their interests and conversations you have as a parent with it as well, all contribute to it gaining a better understanding and helping you as a parent wade through not just the content, but your own feelings.
Oh, wow. So it gets smarter as you use it more.
Yes, it does. So that kind of idea that we're, grounded in attachment, personalized by AI.
Hmm.
One of the things that we've heard from parents that we've surveyed, that we've talked to, is that they don't have anyone to kind of bounce things off of or
Mm.
to unpack their feelings. Of course, they do if they have a partner or they have other supports, but sometimes when it's 2 in the morning or it's first thing in the morning, it's the middle of the afternoon, you don't have that.
Hmm.
And so we've known, for a long time, we've been able to use technology for journaling and for reflection and meditation, things that allow you to be more present as a person. We haven't applied that to parents really. And so we're using those techniques in Era as well as the AI component, which allows you to do a daily check-in. And that daily check-in is a back and forth where you're talking with Era and it remembers what you talked about yesterday. So you don't have to think about what to talk about. When you open it up, it'll ask you, hey, how did that conversation go with your
Mm.
daughter? And do you want to continue talking about that? Or you could talk about something else.
Hmm. So it knows if you've already asked about a certain issue or problem that you're having, then it will retain that and follow up. And wow, that's pretty amazing. And how when you subscribe to the app, do you put in the child's birthday so they know sort of what stage the child is in? And is it for all ages of children?
Yeah, so part of the onboarding process is you enter your children's names and then their birth month. So we're
Mm,
not
okay.
getting too specific with we don't necessarily need the exact date, but the month and the year.
Okay.
And so Era knows what age your child is, which is helpful for giving the right content. Um, and then it's able to start personalizing from there. So the more that you kind of talk or enter information about it, it stores that in your family profile. It stores it for your child and for you, and gets better and better at the personalization. And so we're continuing to kind of bake in that personalized
Mm,
experience to the point where we're starting to recommend content and give the reasons why we're recommending it. Well, you mentioned this about your
mm,
child,
hmm.
Maddie, if that's your child's name. You mentioned this about Maddie, so this is why think that this piece of content might help you. And then you're able to actually unpack that with the AI as well. So I think one of the things I should probably note for you and for your listeners is we're in no way trying to replace a human. I don't think AI should replace humans,
Hmm.
but we think it can be a really great supplement.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
we're seeing that even in therapy and other areas like that, or medical in the medical field, where you still want to talk to your therapist, but that's only once a week or once every
Hmm.
2 weeks. And wouldn't it be nice to have another place where you can continue to unpack your feelings at any
Hmm.
time of the day?
Absolutely. Right. Like you mentioned, 2 in the morning, right? The baby won't sleep. What's going
Yeah.
on? Help me, help me. I know I saw that you had mentioned, potty training specifically. That's relevant for this audience. Also, picky
Hmm.
eating, which is one of our most popular, subjects. The shows that I've done on picky eating are very popular. So I know that moms are certainly interested in those kinds of topics. And so that's what Era can help provide for you. That's really interesting. I'm intrigued by a couple of things I saw in the notes of marrying the instincts with technology, but then also rekindling trust in your parenting instincts. How do you sort of feel Era does that for you?
Sure. Well, one of the problems I think with the current kind of flood of information out there for parenting is that in some ways, just like that study showed, that the more information you look at, your parenting confidence goes down.
Mm,
It really is this idea of like we've stopped trusting our instincts as parents. We've outsourced them to experts. And that wasn't always the case, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, it started kind of through that industrial age where we stopped trusting that parents were able to raise their kids. And part of that, I think, is the modern age makes it difficult to trust our kids.
hmm.
So, parenting 1,000 years ago, I don't think parents were necessarily saying like, well, I wish parenting came with a manual. Why doesn't it come with a manual? I
Mm-hmm.
think that outsourcing of parenting guidance, because it's difficult in the modern age, has led many parents to feel like they don't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But attachment theory has literally kind of uncovered this hidden truth that the most important thing is connection with your child.
Mm-hmm.
And trusting your instincts means, you can't actually do that without a couple other things. So what we say at Parent Lab is we're helping parents with their knowledge, with their observation, and with their intuition. And intuition is not necessarily always right, but it can be honed. And it requires you to have some knowledge, which is what we're providing through we have 200 podcast episodes and we have courses and we have quizzes that help you uncover areas of your parenting and the needs of your child that you could focus on. But it also requires observation. I think that's one of the most important things that we've kind of discovered through working with our pool of experts. And one of your other guests, I listened to one of your other episodes. I remember she said that it really requires proximity as well as eye contact and
Mm-hmm.
engagement. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something we forget as parents,
Mm-hmm.
especially nowadays, that we think that our presence is enough, that just proximity is enough. But it's not actually true. We have to make eye contact with our kids. That connection that we form, especially in the early years, is literally wiring their brains. So
Mm-hmm.
their brains, their development emotionally and even physically requires our attention. And so ERA has mindfulness tools, and we're focusing on journaling as well. So when you talk to ERA, it's kind of a mini form of journaling. And we're trying to help parents with some of the tools that we know are out there that are used for what in the wellness industry to become more present with their kids through that observation piece so that they really can start to come back to their intuition and start trusting their instincts again.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I know. I mean, I think that's probably things that parents struggle with that the most is that instinct and that intuition and learning how to trust that gut and learning how to, like you said, hone that gut and just really know. Like one of the things that I've always tried to use and not always successfully, but is this something that my grandmother would have done? Is this something that like
Yeah.
past generations would have done instead of sort of trying to I don't know, like you said, rely on like so many of the other sort of modern things. What is our instinct? And I saw a video the other day of a dad holding it's his newborn and he just started humming like really low, but
Mhm.
chest to chest,
Yeah.
skin to skin, and the baby just immediately went back to sleep. And it was just like, wow, that bond, like you were talking about. I mean, it's so profound. It was
Yeah.
cool. You mentioned something that I would like you to talk about just a little bit is what is generational wellness?
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's for us, that's kind of our mission statement is to help, create generational wellness and help families build strong foundations and to break cycles and raise secure, happy humans. And so your audience is probably familiar with generational trauma. I think that's something that most people have heard of, where trauma is passed down from parent to child and child to child, and it's a perpetual cycle of trauma. And we mean that kind of in the other direction of generational wellness. And that's part of the big idea for Parent Lab and why we decided we wanted to spend our time and talent and money on helping with the solution is if you can create perpetual trauma, you can create perpetual wellness too.
Hmm.
And there's evidence to show that. There's evidence to show that when you form a secure attachment, which I guess I didn't really go over that with attachment styles, but there's four different types of attachment styles. There's the basic names of those are anxious, avoidant, disorganized, and then secure. Secure being the most healthy type of attachment with your child. And when you form a secure attachment with your child, there's evidence to show that that same type of security, that a secure attachment gets handed down in, 70% of cases from parent to child. So we had this idea that if you could change one parent, you've changed a generation and the next generation, the next generation. So with generational wellness, it's our idea that we could change the world through parenting, and that if you did that, since 100% of people are affected by parents 100% of the time, you'd really, make a dent in helping not just individuals, but in our society too.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm very intrigued about that whole, like you said, the generational trauma that can happen from before that can be pulled through even from, grandparents or people that they haven't even met. And it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I do believe in that. And I think, and I love that idea of like trying to break that cycle with your children as early as possible. That's so wonderful. Is there a sweet spot for the age of the children that parents need help with, or is it like the whole childhood?
Oh yeah, I apologize. You did ask that. I got lost in thought there. Um, ERA is aimed right now towards 0 to 12.
Okay.
The kind of interesting thing is I've got teenage kids and I still use it.
Hmm.
The content is focused more around 0 to 12. We do have a lot of content specifically in our target age range, which is even more narrow than that. It's more like, 2 to 6 is where most of our users are. So we
Okay.
have a lot of content for toddlers and young children. But much of the content will span beyond that. And then, like I said, I have teenagers, and I've found it really helpful for me in kind of unpacking my thoughts and feelings and getting feedback. Having a space to do that, as well as the mindfulness practice material is, universal for any age. It's really for the parents.
So it sounds like you're leveraging both, both the intake versus the output for yourself. It works. I love that you said that it's the 2 to 6 age range specifically. Like that's absolutely the sweet spot for our listeners as well. So I hope that our listeners will check out Parent Lab and also the Era app. Is it available on Apple and Android?
It's currently just available on Apple.
Okay.
We're aiming for Android in the next couple months.
Okay. Great. Well, whenever you are listening to this episode, I hope you will check out the whatever the Play Store is and see if it's available for Android when you're listening. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. Before I let you go, what are your final thoughts? And then also, how can people find out more?
Sure. Um, I mean, my final thoughts and just overall, one of the most important things that I've learned really is that connection piece. It's like wiring your kid's brain actually requires your attention. Our kids need it 100%. It affects who they will become, and that's one of the best and easiest ways outside of the billion tips, tricks, hacks, and scripts. You know, give your kids your attention and your presence. That's one of the most important things you could possibly give them. And yeah, if people would like to check out Era, they could go to getera.app, or they could search for Era Parenting in the App Store. And I hope that people find it useful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll make sure that that link is available in the show notes for people that are listening. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you. And I do hope that the listeners will check out ERA, check out Parent Lab, and learn more about how they can help themselves and their children.
Thanks for having me.
This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Mary Jo Tinlin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.